Hiya, big wrestling fan me. The biggest problems about being a wrestling fan is the copious amounts of problems with it. In my opinion, specifically WWE has one key issue. It's too good. The roster that they have is far too stacked with good wrestlers. WWE currently have 207 wrestlers signed to them across 5 brands, not including 3 unassigned wrestlers, John Cena, Kane, and The Undertaker. Now, the main shows every single week total 5 hours, right? Now, 5 hours sounds like a lot of airtime and a lot of opportunities for all of these wrestlers. It's actually not, because the wrestlers that are in storyline, they get more airtime every single week. The majority of the unused talent ends up feuding in the 24/7 title picture, but even then, that's kind of dominated by R-Truth right now. The reason this is a problem is because you constantly have wrestlers that come in, signing with the WWE, they get promised a main stage for them to showcase their talent as a wrestler, and they end up having maybe 5 good half-decent matches on the main shows, and then they just fade into the background. Why sign these new names if you already have big names? The reason WWE keeps signing these wrestlers is because they just don't want the competition to have them, which is the wrong reason to do anything, in all honesty, because you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because you sign all of these massive names that ultimately mill about the mid-card, do nothing for their entire tenure, and then go back to the independent scene, or they go to a rival company and ultimately have way more success, albeit for slightly less money. Over the past sort of 2 years where AEW has kind of excelled, they've managed to have characters like Jon Moxley, formerly Dean Ambrose, Pac, formerly Neville, Cody, formerly Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, formerly Goldust, and then other examples are people like Kenta, formerly Hideo Itami. One of the most blatant examples of WWE mishandling somebody in the worst possible way was Luke Harper. You'll probably all have heard that John Huber passed away at the very beginning of 2021. And he used to wrestle under the name Brody Lee in the independent scene and AEW, and he used to wrestle under the name Luke Harper in WWE. He was a prime example of somebody that tried to break out, and he was a fantastic talent in the ring, but WWE was just far too vast. It had so many just good wrestlers that it was very difficult to know what to do with him. And then he finally got a chance to excel as Brody Lee, the Exalted One in AEW, and tragically he passed away, so he was never able to meet his full potential. I mean, think about all of the current wrestlers who are signed to WWE that we haven't seen in forever, like Aleister Black, or Cassius Ohno, or Andrade, who was very recently denied his release, I think is how that situation panned out. Cedric Alexander has only recently been given something to do with the Hurt Business. Humberto Carrillo, who Vince McMahon apparently is just bored with, he doesn't have anything else for him. Bo Dallas has been criminally underutilized ever since he came up from NXT all those years ago. And then you've got guys like Ricochet, who was fantastic and still continues to be fantastic, but just has nothing to do. He's in these middling matches that have no consequence at all. You've got guys like Cesaro, who still hasn't been able to break through that glass ceiling. Shinsuke Nakamura, who was the biggest name in Japanese wrestling and signed with WWE, had a very explosive match with Sami Zayn as his debut, had a good to great, depending on who you ask, run as the NXT champion, then came up to the main roster and has had no success whatsoever. Guys like Ty Dillinger, who were homegrown WWE talent and had nothing to do on the main roster. Ty Dillinger managed to get himself over with a fantastic gimmick that worked with a smaller crowd, and then they did nothing with it. Samoa Joe is one of the best talents to ever come from the independent scene, and what is he doing? He's on commentary right now. What are you doing with him, WWE? Joe is better than that. And then not to mention all the tag teams that have come up through NXT just to be forgotten in the shuffle, like The Revival, who are now FTR in AEW. You've got American Alpha. Chad Gable's got nothing to do. Unfortunately, Jason Jordan is working backstage as a producer because of medical reasons, but he never really got a fantastic run either. War Raiders, who were by far one of the best tag teams to ever wrestle, what are they doing? They vacated the NXT championships. WWE didn't want them to lose when they left NXT. They didn't want to have to put somebody over. And then they came up to the main roster, completely rebranded as the Viking Experience, then the Viking Raiders, and they're just doing nothing. And then you've got guys like Lucha House Party, which they've just been lumped together because they're all luchadors. That's it. There's no gimmick there. There's nothing. They just all wear masks, so they lump them all together. Gran Metalik was in the final of the Cruiserweight Classic. And what's he doing? We haven't seen him wrestle on live TV in so long. In a way, NXT is a blessing and a curse in WWE. It works in some sense because it's kind of a rotational system. Guys get signed, they work in NXT to kind of learn the WWE style and to establish an audience within WWE. They have a fantastic run, then they come up to the main roster and fade into the background. The exception to the rule would be Seth Rollins. And then you've got guys like Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, who had a WWE run, were let go or left for their own reasons, went to the independent scene or to a rival company, and because they worked for it, or because they were a big fish in a small pond, they were able to establish themselves as a proper name in wrestling. There's nothing wrong with being a big fish in a small pond. I would absolutely much rather watch a whole load of different small ponds that have big fish in them than watch the ocean that we're currently watching. Because then you realise, if they're all big fish, none of them are that big. And ultimately, I don't know what WWE could do to kind of fix this, other than let a whole bunch of wrestlers go. Or, alternatively, just create another show for them. It's not like you don't have the money to do it. My point is, a lot of the active roster, or inactive roster on WWE, they kind of need to decide between a good paycheck or good storylines. And that's not the way that it should be. They need to stop signing wrestlers just to spite the competition, because all that happens is you get a whole load of wasted potential. Because ultimately, as a wrestling fan, you don't care which company is better. You just want to see good wrestling.